So next thing we want to discuss are the first steps following a fire. And I know that a lot of you have had to deal with this, but one of the most important things that you can do, obviously, is get housing. If you lose your home, or even if you're going to be out for a period of time, it can be very difficult because, particularly given the fact that there were at least two whole towns that were destroyed, and there isn't a ton of available space in some of the surrounding towns, sometimes it's necessary to relocate. Sometimes you can't do that because of work or other things. One of the few good things that has come out of the pandemic is the fact that a lot of people are able to work remotely. So if you can work remotely, and you can relocate to a place like Chico or some other larger place that's going to have more housing available, that's certainly something that you may want to consider. One thing to keep in mind is that it typically takes between a year and 2 years if you lose your home to get it rebuilt, and that's under the best of circumstances. That's if you have a planning department that is very on the ball, that will get you the permits that you need, if you're able to find a contractor and your insurance is such that you're going to have enough money to rebuild. The quickest I've ever seen it happen is about 12 months. Typically, it's between 2 and 3 years. So, that's unfortunate, and it tends to be one of the biggest issues that our clients have. The bright side is they have extended, they being the insurance companies, and this is something that the state of California passed a law to force them to do, but they have extended the amount of ALE, which is alternate living expenses benefits, that you will get to 3 years. So it used to be that it was 2 years. Now, starting with the law they passed last year, it's 3 years. So you should have 3 years of benefits to be able to rebuild. And remember, under your insurance policy, the language in ALE is that you are entitled to like, kind, and quality. So insurance companies, they're always trying to save money, and so they will often encourage you to take something that is inferior to what you had. You may decide that you want to do that. It may be that you had a 4-bedroom house, but you were able to find a smaller house that is close to your work, and it's better for you and your family to be there. If you decide to do that, that's absolutely fine. However, if you do decide that you want to have like, kind, and quality, and the only place to do it is someplace a little bit farther away, even if it's more expensive, they have to pay for that. You have to exhaust all reasonable steps, but once you've done that, then they have to pay for the other. One thing that I really want to encourage all of our clients to do is to use us as a resource for issues with insurance. We've been through this many, many times. Oftentimes we can answer your questions. When we can't, we have an expert on staff, a gentleman named Joel Alba. He is a retired insurance adjuster. He worked for a number of different companies for about 30 years. He did everything from just the normal line adjusting to, when he retired, he was a manager and he oversaw it. So he's very familiar with how insurance companies operate. He's happy to look at anything that you have and help you interpret it. If you're like me, when you look at a lot of these policies, your eyes just glaze over and you say, what does that mean? Somebody like Joel can look at it, he knows what it means, and he can talk you through it. A lot of times what will happen if you're having issues with your insurance company is we can talk with Joel, he can tell us what needs to be done, we'll write a letter, and then it'll get resolved. And all that is, part of the work that we do for you. There's no additional charge. It's just a service that we provide. So since it's there, I really encourage people to take advantage of it. Anytime you have those questions, let us know. If you want to talk to an expert, we can put you in touch with Joel. If you'd like to have him review your policy, no problem at all. But there are going to be some issues that are going to be coming up for those of you that have lost your home. And so again, I really encourage you to reach out. One issue that comes up a lot and that people have questions on is cleanup. And this is or can be a sensitive topic because the cleanup is managed by one of 3 entities. It's either the county, the state, which is California OES, Office of Emergency Services, or the federal government through FEMA. Now, the lion's share of the money, about 85%, comes from FEMA. Usually they will have local entities that will administer it, but sometimes, particularly in less populated counties, sometimes it would overwhelm the local structure to be able to do it. So FEMA will just come in and administer it. The key to remember, though, is that it is the government program. And so you will be getting a request or an opt-in, and you can either opt in or not. The benefit to opting in is that they will, if you're uninsured, they'll do it for free. If you are insured, then they will only charge the money that is available under your contract. And they will make sure that it is done correctly to meet all current environmental standards. And if you've ever had to look into anything like this, the environmental standards are pretty onerous. They often require quite a bit of money to comply with. And one of the problems that a lot of our clients have had is that if you opt out of the program and you say, no, I'm going to do it myself, 9 times out of 10, the amount of money available under debris removal in your policy is not going to be sufficient to meet the current environmental standards. If you don't meet those standards in the cleanup, then they won't issue your permit and you can't rebuild. So we have had people who've had their rebuilding delayed quite a bit because they elected not to participate in the program and did it on their own. I'm not telling you one way or another what to do. That's a decision that each person has to make. Some people feel very strongly about it. And again, it's not my job to tell you what to do. You've been through enough. The only thing that I would really caution you on is that if you decide not to go into the program, and if you're going to do it yourself, it's very important to make sure that you have someone who has all of the proper licenses and qualifications. Because what often happens is somebody will hire a contractor or something like that who doesn't have the necessary licenses. That person may very well do their best, but they won't be able to bring it to the standards that it needs to be. And now the person who hired the contractor is left with a situation where it's too late to opt into the program, and they now have a large bill that they're going to have to pay in order to clean this up according to current environmental regulations before they can get their building permit. So again, just something to consider. If you are going to opt out of the program, it's critical to make sure that whoever you hire can meet all of the necessary requirements and can do it for the amount that is contained in your policy. So that brings me to the next topic, which is recovering money from PG&E. And obviously, this is the most important part of what we do. So the way these cases work is like this. It's a little bit different than a standard case. Some of you may have had, car accidents, something like that, where you've been involved in a lawsuit. These cases are different because they're so much larger. The principles are the same, but the logistics, because there will be thousands of people involved in this, are going to be different than just a standard single incident case. Now, we've represented people all over the state and in other states. We currently have about 10,000 clients in the state of California, and this ranges from fires in LA to Orange County to the PG&E fires in 2017, 2018, and even more recently in 2019 and 2020. What we typically do is we get together with the other attorneys who specialize in these types of cases. And there are a group of us, there's probably 8 to 10 firms around the state who are involved in all of the major fires. We all know each other, we've worked together, and we're familiar with what needs to be done. So we'll go in, we'll meet with people, we'll all sign people up, and we'll all have our own individual clients, but we'll all work together to prove liability. The other group that we work with is the subrogating insurance attorneys. And a lot of people aren't familiar with this. I wasn't until I started doing this type of work. But what happens in these cases is that your insurance companies, State Farm, Allstate, USAA, Nationwide, all of those different companies will be paying out money because of the lawsuit. And in many cases, it's a large amount. My guess is in this case, they're probably going to pay out close to $1 billion. It's going to be a significant amount, and that's assuming that the fire doesn't hit Susanville. Right now, the number of homes, according to the statistics we saw yesterday, the number of buildings destroyed was about, I think, 1,273, right around there. if you figure that most claims are going to be somewhere between 6 and 800,000, that gives you an idea of how much they're going to pay out. Now, obviously, some claims are going to be larger, some claims are going to be smaller, but that's kind of the general rule. So the insurance companies are going to have a huge amount of money that they are going to be paying to their insured. Now, as part of the policy that you have, the insurance companies have a right to sue a third party like PG&E who caused them to have to pay the money, and they do that. So there are a group of 5 firms, and it's the same 5 firms that are involved in every fire that do that. We know them very well. We've worked with them for almost 2 decades now, and we work with them to prove liability against PG&E because that's in everybody's interest. The question that a lot of people ask is, how does it work with insurance? If, for example, I get $600,000 from my insurance for the loss of my home and my possessions, and I recover money from PG&E, do I then have to pay it back? The answer to that question is no. The reason is that we are not suing for any amount that your insurance company has paid you. The insurance lawyers are doing that. What we're suing for is the difference between what your insurance company paid you and the amount it's going to take for you to be made whole. And let me give you an example of what I mean. Most people will typically have pretty good coverage for their home, which is called coverage A. It's changed a little bit recently because the price of building has gone up so much, and frankly, a lot of this is due to the fires that PG&E has caused. After the destruction in the North Bay, specifically Santa Rosa, where they lost over 5,000 homes, and then the much more recent and tragic damage to Paradise in the Camp Fire, where they lost almost 19,000 structures and about 14,000 homes, the cost of building skyrocketed. And it wasn't anybody doing anything improper. It's just, supply and demand. All of a sudden, you had a huge demand. And so the cost of materials went up, the cost of labor went up, all of those things increased dramatically. Prior to the fire, you could build a standard home in the town of Paradise for about $250 a square foot. If you're talking about an average standard custom home, not, super nice, but, not a tract home, a standard custom stick-built home would have cost you about $250 a square foot. Now it's at least $350 a square. And we've seen similar price increases all over in Sonoma County and Napa County and all of those areas. The cost of building has gone up quite a bit. So because of that, there may be a gap in coverage A, and that old rule of thumb, which is that most people have pretty good coverage A, doesn't always apply. So let's say that your coverage A is $500,000, and it's going to cost you $600,000 to rebuild your home. You've sat down with your contractor, you've come up with a proposal, they've looked at it, and they've said, okay, here's what it's going to cost to rebuild your home, $600,000. That's a $100,000 gap that we need to sue for in order for you to be made whole. Then we look at personal property. Most policies have a 60% personal property coverage. So coverage B, which is personal property, is going to be 60% of coverage A. So that would be $300,000. Obviously, that's a lot of money, but one of the things we've learned from doing this for the past couple of decades is that people tend to have more things than they think they do. So when you start making a list, it's amazing just how much stuff we all accumulate and how high those lists tend to be. Typically, we find there's a gap between about 100 and 250,000 in terms of what people receive from insurance and what they actually had in terms of personal property. So that's another gap. Let's say that's 100. So now you've got 200,000. The third area, and this is by far the most common, is outbuildings and landscaping and trees. That's coverage C. Most people who were affected by this fire lived in a rural environment. And they did so because they liked the natural beauty of the land, the trees, those kinds of things, whether it's oak or fir or whatever it is. Because of the way the insurance policies are structured, coverage C tends to only be about 5% of coverage A. That's the standard. Sometimes it's 10, usually it's 5, but you're somewhere in there. So if you had, again, that 500,000 in coverage A, your coverage C is going to be somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000. If you had a couple of acres and you had some significant trees, that is not going to be remotely enough. Trees, particularly oak trees, are extraordinarily valuable. Individual trees can be worth in the tens of thousands. We have had individual trees be worth over 100,000. Those are rare. I mean, those are kind of signature trees. But if you're just talking about, standard old growth trees, if you have a couple of acres, you're going to be well above what your coverage C pays. And then if you had an outbuilding, people often have barns or workshops or anything like that. Once again, you're going to be well in excess of what coverage C covers. So we look at that as well. And that, again, would typically be somewhere between 100, 200, sometimes 300,000. So if we take 200, you've now got 100 for the structure, 100 for personal property, and 200 for the trees and outbuildings. So that's 400,000 in out-of-pocket costs that you are going to need to recover in order to be made whole economically. So what we do is we have our experts come in and we put together a demand that sets forth those numbers. And we'll have an expert arborist, we'll have a contractor, we'll have any expert that you need. They will come in, write a report, and then we'll prepare a demand with an attached spreadsheet that will set forth the amount and the basis for that amount. So we might say, one of the arborists that we use a lot is Western Wildfire Consultants. So we could say damage to trees, 150,000, C report from Western Wildfire Consultants. We do that for everything. For the contractor, we'll put their report in to justify the lost structures. All of those things you do, you prepare the spreadsheet, and that's your demand for the economic damages. In addition to that, because this is a suit against a public utility, which PG&E is, you're also entitled to recover the attorney fees and the costs of suit for those types of cases, or for those types of damages. So for any economic damages that are related to real or personal property, you can recover the attorney fees on them and the cost of suit. So the cost for the experts, the cost for the liability experts, all of those things. And all of that is put into it. So let's say that is going to be another 250,000 on top of that 400,000. Now the demand is going to be 650,000. In addition to that, you're also entitled to the non-economic damages. And that's the emotional distress you went through fleeing the fire, the annoyance, disturbance, inconvenience, mental anguish, anything that you experience as a result of losing your home or anything else you lost. Cherished possessions, that's a huge one. And by cherished possessions, that is actually a legal term of art. Specifically, what it refers to are items that have great sentimental value to you, but have little to no fair market value. And the example I always give is a photograph I have of my grandmother. My grandmother passed away about 2 years ago, just shy of her 99th birthday, so she hung in there. She and I were very close, and there is a picture of her that was taken when she was about 50 that was always in her house. And so whenever I would go over, the picture was in the background, and it was just something that always, reminded me of her. So after she passed, I asked my mom and my sisters if they would be okay if I had that. They gave it to me, and it's up in my office. Now, that is not something that has any type of fair market value. There's no market for a photograph of my grandmother, but it has a tremendous amount of sentimental value to me. If my house were to burn down after I got the kids and the animals, that's probably what I would take. So, that's kind of an example. Another thing would be, love letters that, you may have exchanged with your spouse, something that your kids made you for Mother's Day or Father's Day when they were in kindergarten, those kind of things, the kind of things that, again, nobody's going to pay any money for them, but they have a tremendous amount of value to you. And because they don't have any real economic value, it's not considered an economic loss, but it is an emotional distress loss, and it is something that you can seek compensation for. So what we tend to do is we ask our clients to make a list of those, and we list them as part of the non-economic damages. and recover for those. Another very common one is any type of war memorabilia. For example, if you have a parent who received some type of a medal in a war. An example would be my uncle was killed in Vietnam, and my father has the flag that was on his casket. So that's another type of thing that there isn't really a fair market value for it, but it is something that has a great deal of sentimental value. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. So we do all of that. We submit a demand to PG&E, and we try and resolve the case. And typically, we're able to resolve it through mediation. Sometimes we're not, and in that case, then we go forward and we demand a trial. These cases almost never go to trial, mainly because PG&E does not want to get in front of a jury, but it's very important to try and get the cases to trial as quickly as possible, because PG&E is like any other corporation. They're not going to pay top dollar until they're forced to do so. So what we do in these cases is we get together with the other experienced attorneys who do this kind of work, including both individual plaintiffs' attorneys and the subrogating plaintiffs' attorneys. We come together, we form a plan, and we push the case forward to trial. Typically, these cases are venued, meaning that they're in the court of whatever city the defendant happens to have its headquarters in. So when we sue Edison, we're typically in LA. When we sue PG&E, we're typically in San Francisco. There are two reasons for that. One is that anytime you have a situation like this where there are multiple counties that are affected, you have to pick one, because all of the cases are going to be coordinated in front of one judge. And usually the larger areas are the best able to deal with these types of cases. If you look at some of the smaller counties, it's very difficult for them and for their systems to handle cases of this size. To give you an example, the Butte Fire in Calaveras County ended up having about 2,000 cases associated with it. And this was a fire started by PG&E in 2015. One of the reasons that Calaveras sent the case to Sacramento is that if it would have been in front of the Calaveras court, it would have doubled the total number of cases, and they only had 2 courtrooms in Calaveras County. So it just wasn't capable of doing it. We had a similar situation in Shasta for the 2020 Zog fire, which was also started by PG&E. Shasta is a little bit larger, but once again, they did not want to deal with thousands of cases, and so they sent it to San Francisco. So here, the two options are either going to be San Francisco or Sacramento. I think it'll probably be San Francisco, but ultimately that will be up to a body called the Judicial Council, which is a group of 10 judges that is chaired by the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. And what we'll do after we file a complaint is we will file a petition. It's called a JCCP petition, Judicial Council on Complex Procedures, a JCCP petition to ask the court to assign it to one of the other jurisdictions. We typically ask for San Francisco because for two reasons. One, PG&E's management and all of its directors are in San Francisco, so it's a convenient place for us to do discovery. And two, the juries in San Francisco are famous for being very generous to plaintiffs, and pretty much everybody in San Francisco hates PG&E. So it's a very good venue for us. They always fight it. They try to get it somewhere else. Here, because of the size of the case, it's, as you know, now the second largest fire in California history. I'd be shocked if it didn't go to one of the two large cities. There's an outside chance it could go to Sacramento, but I think realistically it likely will go to San Francisco. Either one of those two venues is fine. We've been in Sacramento, and I very much like the court system there, but typically with PG&E, we choose San Francisco. So that's kind of an overview of what is going to happen. This process usually takes about a year before we can get the case to the point where PG&E admits that they are going to be liable and they start doing mediations. Sometimes it can be a little shorter. Our record was in Butte, where we got the first settlement in 10 months, and sometimes it can be longer. It really depends upon the judge and whether he or she is willing to push the case to trial. In a couple of our Edison cases, unfortunately, we got a judge who did not have a lot of fortitude, and he was always letting the defendants delay the trial. On the other hand, in some of the other cases, when the judges push them to trial, it forces them to make a decision, and then we can get the cases resolved. So that's our plan. That's what we'll do. I wouldn't expect any settlements to happen for at least a year, but usually between that first and second year is when cases start to happen. And once they do, they tend to start settling with some regularity. There obviously are going to be a large number of plaintiffs here, so the settlement process likely will take a year to 2 years. So one of the things that we always encourage people to do is to get started on the process now, work with us so we can get your damages itemized and get your mediation packet prepared, and then we'll prepare a demand, and as soon as the process starts, we'll go ahead and serve it. So that's the topics that I wanted to cover, and what I'd like to do is just open it up, and if any of you have any questions, please let me know.
Do you have any questions?
Hmm?
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any question because I can't recall much of what he said.
Okay.
How about
Okay.
you? You got a question?
Not right at this point.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to start doing regular virtual town halls, and then as soon as it's safe, we're going to start doing physical town halls. Right now, we're tentatively looking at September 7th for the first of those town halls. I don't know if it will be safe. We obviously don't want to put anybody in danger, and we also don't want to get in the way of the emergency crews. So if there's a place that we can do it up there that would be safe and convenient for folks, and we will. If not, we'll wait, because obviously what has to take priority are the folks that are fighting the fire and are helping everybody out. But the other thing that we want to do is we'll probably start maybe Tuesday or Wednesdays after work, just doing a weekly town hall where anybody who has questions can call in. We'll do this type of thing, and we'll answer any questions that anybody has. So again, before we get off, is there anybody on that has any questions at all?
I think you have answered pretty much all of ours to start with anyhow. So
Okay.
like I said, we're going to look for a small trailer or something to live in so that I can go back to work in another week. I work in Quincy with special needs kids and special ed. So it's very important for me to get back to those kids.
Yeah, well, that is definitely the Lord's work, and it's obviously not something you can do remotely. So yeah, you're going to have to be there for that. One thing I really want to encourage all of our clients is there's a reluctance to reach out to us. People say, well, I don't want to bother you. And you know, obviously we certainly appreciate that, but I think it's critical to remember that one of our important jobs is to help you understand and help you with the process. Most people have never gone through anything like this, and so we are a resource. If you have questions, if you're curious about things, please let us know, and we'll either answer it, or if we don't know the answer, we can find it out. But again, we've got two jobs here. One is to familiarize you with the process, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then two is to get you the right amount of money so that you're made whole and you can get your life back to where it was before this happened.
Okay. So if we have trouble and my husband's retired now, but he's a retired teacher. If we need some money to be able to buy a trailer or something that we could put somewhere, evident, you know, it's not going to happen to go to our space. I mean, every building that we had is ash.
Gone.
So if we needed some money to buy a trailer, would that be available for us? We just live in a small town.
Yeah, no, we should be able to help you with that. So just let us know what it is that you need. And a lot of times, one of the things that I've seen is insurance will allow people to buy things like fifth wheels as part of the ALE. So that should be something that we can help you out with. But again, that's a perfect example. please use us as a resource. If you go to your insurance company and say, we think the best option for us is to get this fifth wheel, and to do that, can we get the ALE money? And they say no, please let us know, and we're happy to help.
Okay. We're having a hard time finding anything. There's so many people that are involved in this now that we were
Yeah.
even going to try and go into a little cabin. I mean, it's just about a one-room cabin where you take a shower and you can brush your teeth at the same time. That's no kidding, like 4x4 or something like that. So
So it's like a New York apartment.
yeah, I guess so. I've never been to New York, but that's been a concern. Where can we go?
Right. Well, I think in all likelihood, in terms of getting, for example, a fifth wheel, which a lot of our clients have done, probably Sacramento is going to be your best bet. Chico may have a good selection, but it may be best to go to Sacramento. And again, I have had many clients who've gotten their insurance companies to do that. If there's any issue, though, please let me know, and we're happy to help out.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a main question for me. My sister and brother-in-law, it's been 5 weeks now because we were evacuated one day, and it was for 2 or 3 weeks. And then they let us go home, and that same day, I just put everything away. And the same day we were said, you have to get out now. And so by the time I have had too many horses, by the time we got them put in the trailer and my 2 dogs, we had to get out of there. Fire was coming over the trees like 60 feet. So.
Were you able to get all of your horses and animals out?
The 2 horses and the 2 dogs, but all my jewelry, every year that we've been married, he's bought me jewelry, and lately he's been buying me silver. My jewel box is in the house. It's all gone. My dad's Bibles.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And that's your dad's Bible. That's a classic example of something that is a cherished possession. And so that's the kind of thing that is irreplaceable. And I'm so sorry. So anything we can do, please let me know. But that's a perfect example of something that we can help out with, and we're happy to. So if you have any issues with your insurance, just let me know. Okay.
We'll do that. We appreciate all your help in talking with us. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's what we're here for. So, anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. You're on mute. Andrea? Yeah, you're on mute. Can you unmute it? There you go. Perfect.
There. I tried earlier and it wouldn't let me, so there we go. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm Andrea. I grew up in Greenville, spent my whole childhood, graduated from Greenville High School. My parents' primary residence is still there. It's out in the valley, and it survived. I moved my parents. Yeah, I live down in Gridley area. I'm a school teacher, and I moved my parents to Chico a year ago for health reasons. And so we're fixing up the primary residence to maybe sell, maybe keep, or whatever. So my parents had 2 rentals in town of Greenville. And over the last year and a half, I've had to take over management of them. We completely lost one to the fire, and then we're with the insurance State Farm adjuster all day yesterday on the second one, and it's got horrible smoke damage. The home didn't burn, but the smoke damage is terrible. The whole interior is solid black. We have a 79-year-old male tenant that's been our tenant for over 15 years. He has no family, and he cannot stay there. So he's in the process of going to have to move out. And so we're trying to help him find housing. Should I be in this conversation at all? Is that something where these rentals?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things that people don't really understand a lot of the time until they experience it is just how devastating smoke damage can be. On the one hand, it can be minor. For example, in the 2007 San Diego fires, we had to evacuate, and I think one of my daughters left the window open. So, you know, there was some smoke, but it was fine.
Yeah,
But when
that
you're
happened.
talking
There was
about,
2 windows open.
right. But when you're talking about close proximity to a fire, like you just described, the house can be rendered uninhabitable. And there are times when you literally have to tear it down. So obviously it's going to be up to the health folks to look at it and see whether or not it is going to be habitable. But either way, to repair that is going to be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And again, we have a lot of clients who had property that they rented out and lost it. And that's the basis for their claim, because obviously they're entitled to rebuild the home, redo the landscaping. A lot of times there's damage to driveways, things like that. And then also the lost rent. Sometimes policies cover those, sometimes they don't. Oftentimes it's kind of a hybrid where there'll be a policy that'll cover the lost rental for a year, but it'll be 2 or 3 years before it can be rebuilt. So there'll be a big gap there.
Yeah, we have a year coverage on both. So yeah, like one of the questions that came up yesterday, it's kind of an interesting dilemma. There's a ton of smoke damage. Like you can literally just draw on the walls, on the ceiling, on all the appliances. You can draw with your fingers the amount of soot that's in there. And our tenants, the majority of our tenants' possessions are completely destroyed, and he didn't have insurance, renter's insurance. But like one of the questions was, or one of the issues that came up was, the roof was on it, that's on the home is old, it needs redone. The adjuster said oh gosh, the insulation in the ceiling is all damaged by smoke, so he needs to replace that. And so my husband said, well, will you replace the roof then? And he said no. And so we want to get the roof done. And so, I mean, there's no point. I mean, we just want to do it. When we do it, we want to do it right and do it once. My husband would like to go in and just do the work himself. And so I don't know if that messes things up, if he goes in and tries to, we kind of just want to get in there and get it done and be done with it, and not wait years for, you know, and it's going to take contractors.
Totally. Yeah. No, the thing is, in California, if you own something, then you can work on it. You have to be licensed contractor, work on somebody else's, but if you own it, then you can work on it. So what we do in those situations, because we've had a number of folks that have either been contractors and built their own house or done extensive repairs, is we'll get an estimate from a contractor as to what it would cost.
Okay.
So let's say that, you know, you get a qualified licensed contractor, he comes in and he gives you a bid for $100,000 to repair everything in your home. If your husband then goes and does it, then the measure of that loss is still the $100,000, because PG&E is not entitled to the value of your labor. They have to pay whether you do it or whether somebody else does it.
Very good. Okay.
Can I ask?
And then obviously your renter would have a claim as well, because it sounds like all of his personal property is going to have to be destroyed, given that it's, you know, severely damaged by the smoke. And again, unfortunately, that's something we see a fair amount of.
So I should encourage him to get involved in this. I figured, I know just he didn't have renter's insurance, and so he was out. Obviously that, and our insurance couldn't help him either.
Yeah.
Because
no, and that's the thing, is we represent anybody who has any kind of significant damage. So whether they're renters, whether they're owners, or whether they're landlords who lost a rental property, all of those people will have claims, and you know, we're happy to bring them.
Okay. We're just trying to find him a home right now. It's horrible. He's really, he was in a routine of where he lived, and so now he's with a friend in Quincy, but they said he just is, he can't remember conversations, and he doesn't remember where he's at, and it's terrible.
No, and it's really true for elderly folks. They do tend to get into routines, and that can be the most difficult part. And one of the really unfortunate things is, because of the scarcity of housing in the area, he may have to move to a place that's going to be more urban. And It's very unfortunate. The problem is there does not seem to be a lot of options, at least in terms of what we're finding when we're looking around trying to help people find places. Everything tends to be booked up.
Yeah, we're gonna go look at a place for him down here with us in Gridley on Monday. But I'm so concerned because it sounds like he's right at the teeter-totter point of not being able to just live on his own and then being completely uprooted from his home and the environment he knows down to a completely different city. I don't know. I'm very nervous about him doing well in that environment. And so like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing that, and I don't know much obviously about that particular city, but a lot of places do have senior centers that are a great resource. So in San Diego, we have a really good one. So yeah, maybe there's something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to look into all those different options and maybe getting home health to come in once a week or something, or just, and then he'll just become our adopted
grandfather,
family member. I'm guessing. I mean, I visualize seeing him at our dinner table at Thanksgiving from now on, and I don't know.
Well, that's great. I mean, good for you. That one of the things that always inspires me is how many great stories you hear like that in these kinds of disasters. I mean, unfortunately, you know, you do hear some bad ones, but overall, I'm just always amazed and really heartened by how these kind of disasters bring out the good in people. So.
Right. I was referred to you by Nicole Platel out of Chico.
Ah, yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're doing the all the estate planning for my parents, this whole transition. And so in the middle of them redoing the trust, I had to call and say, you know, those assets you're going to roll into the trust, you're going up in smoke. So anyway, they speak very highly of you, and so I feel better having someone to go through this with, besides just the insurance company, which I feel is good too. They flew our adjuster in from Florida. He's in Roseville and he's here till Christmas, and he seems like a really nice guy. But I feel like it's good to have a perspective as well. And
and insurance is hit or miss. I've had many clients that have had excellent experiences, and then unfortunately I've had clients who've had bad experiences. So you know, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not, but anytime you have questions, just please think of us as a resource. You can bounce it off us, and and we're happy to help.
You know, and the only other question I have is just, I just feel like there's other parties that are involved in this as well. And I guess if they're government agency, I guess they're immune from anything, but I don't know.
It depends. Now, it depends on the immunity. If it's a question of firefighting, then yes, I think it's 851 of the government code. They have absolute immunity for that. Okay. There are certain very narrow areas where you can sue governmental entities, but it's pretty difficult. And in this case, it's not something we'd recommend in general, because PG&E is going to have plenty of money for this because they can tap into AB 1054. And the last thing we would want is for a local government, particularly one that doesn't have a lot of money, to be assigned a large amount of liability, because that would mean that the victims probably aren't going to get paid. The government would just have to declare bankruptcy, and PG&E has a non-delegable duty. So that's why we like to go after them.
And that's understandable. And I think your goals are very different as well. The community up there that I hang out with and hear from is they want to go to the top and make change in the management of force, that kind of thing, which is a completely different beast than I think what your goal is with PG&E. And you know, you talk to a lot of people and it's like, not PG&E's fault. They were just the little guy, or the Sierra Club prevented them from cutting that tree down, and blah, 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 blah. I don't know all that. I don't, you know, I don't know what the truth is, but.
Let me just tell you this. One thing PG&E is not is the little guy. They've got plenty of money, and they also, remember, they get a guaranteed 10% profit on everything they do, which none of the rest of us do. And with that comes the duty to do things like cutting those lines or cutting those trees. And, you know, they're the ones that chose to build their lines through those trees. And they did it because it was cheaper than going around or undergrounding.
Right.
And, you know, they're entitled to make that decision. But once they harm people, you know, they have to pay for it. And so, you know, I completely understand that, you know, linemen and some of the people that work for PG&E are very nice people, and
Right.
no one's contending that they're not.
Yeah.
But they spent about 2 decades putting profits in front of people, and now we're seeing the harm of that because they let the system get so bad. To their credit, they are trying to fix it now, but the problem is you can't fix 2 decades worth of neglect in 2 years, which is what they've been trying to do.
Well, and it's so disheartening with the campfire as well. They reached the settlement with PG&E, and then Newsom comes in with his rescue plan or whatever that just kind of bailed PG&E out anyway. And I feel like they just passed the buck on to us to pay anyways, the taxpayer. And so, you know, it's frustrating. And I'm glad they're on probation and now, because I feel like we have a little bit more of a pinch than those prior victims did. And it's unconscionable to me that we've lost 3 more towns, entire towns to fire. The adjuster that was up there with us yesterday has been in State Farm for 34 years and couldn't believe what he was seeing when he was standing in the middle of Greenville. He just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's like a bomb went off. I mean, that's
Yes.
the only analogy that I can give when I go in, because we do wait until, you know, the first responders are out of the way, but then we'll go in and look at the places, and it's just incredible.
it's just like paradise. It's unrecognizable. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to ask, we're having troubles getting an adjuster up here.
Okay. Who's your insurance company?
Assurance or, but I can give that to you later if you want. I can email it to you or something. But we have one that was supposed to come up, and we have National Guard in Greenville right now that's letting people in or out or won't. And we were told that he couldn't get in to appraise the house. Well, this has been how long now? We know nothing.
Yeah.
So we're
the best advice I can give is to always communicate in writing, because again, most insurance companies are going to do a fine job and it's not going to be an issue. But what I always encourage my clients to do is to create a paper trail. Is you just want to write, whether it's email or letter, so that you can say, hey, here's our situation. We know you're busy, but if you could please have someone inspect the home so that we can take the next step, we would appreciate it. And just, you want to follow up that way, because if you are, it's only about 10% of people who have bad experiences with their insurance company. But if you're in that 10%, we don't want it to be a he said, she said. We want it to be, well, look at this file. It's well documented. They've been requesting in writing, and you fail to comply, because they have duties that they owe to you. And if they don't comply with them, then you can sue them. So that's why it's important to just paper the file and make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed.
Okay.
And we can help with that if you have any issues.
It's pretty much the sheriff. That is how we were able to get in. But it was a combination of our adjuster calling and us calling, and the issue with the tenant and him needing to get in there, but we couldn't touch anything until the adjuster could get there. But call Todd Johns directly.
Yeah, we will.
Or go see him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just, you know, so you know, a lot of my clients have expressed they've been upset about some of the really strict policies about letting people in. I can tell you, the looting is a huge problem. And I've had so many clients who their house survived, but then it was looted, and so they lost a significant portion of their property. In fact, it's funny. We represent Erin Brockovich in one of the fires in the Woolsey fire down in LA, and that happened to her. She had to leave, but because people were able to sneak in, she had a lot of stuff stolen. And it's so common, and that's why they do that. And I understand why they do it.
Me too.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Todd, he was one of my husband's students in school. He played football and was one of his teachers. So we can get a hold of Todd. One advantage of living in a small area,
gave-
you know.
He gave us a pass. Yeah, he gave my
Yeah,
husband a
good.
pass. So, and he's not doling those out, but if you can get the pass, that's what you need. And I feel like they're just now starting to open up, and our adjuster said that their whole State Farm group had just been notified that they were about to. So I think this week they'll start coming in. So
Okay,
I feel like it's just now starting to loosen up
okay.
for the
Well, that's
adjusters.
good.
Yeah.
You went to school in Greenville also?
Yes, yes. I went to school with Todd, and yeah, I was class
How-
of 8
You know Otto then?
bracket.
Yeah,
He was my vice principal.
okay. He's
Yeah.
on here with me right now.
Oh, hi, Otto. Coach. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but.
Both of my brothers played football for him.
Okay,
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I love it.
Good deal. All right. All right. Well, again, any questions, anything we can do, please use this as a resource, and we'll be in touch. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.